I never expected to become a single mother, but life has a way of throwing curveballs. My name is Emma. I'm 30 years old, and my daughter Lily is 2. Her father, David, and I met during a brief fling. We didn't intend for it to be anything serious, but things just happened. He was 32 at the time, living in a different state, and we'd meet up every few weeks for a weekend when he was in town for work. Our connection was great, but we never talked about long-term plans. When I found out I was pregnant, I was in shock. It wasn't planned, and honestly, I didn't know what I was going to do. David and I talked about the pregnancy, and we both agreed that he'd be involved, but not as a couple. He wanted to co-parent, and I appreciated that. But the reality of becoming a mother hit me hard. We didn't live together, and we weren't really a family. But David was on board, and we made a plan to raise Lily together, even if we weren't in a romantic relationship. But then, just a few weeks after we made our decision, David tragically passed away in a car accident. His death was a shock to everyone, especially his parents, Linda and Peter. They were devastated. I, too, was heartbroken. We had just started to build a future for Lily, and now she would never meet her father. It felt so unfair. David's family was close-knit, and Lily was their first grandchild, so she became their lifeline during this incredibly dark period. They lived in a small town about 12 hours away from where I was raising Lily, and their life revolved around a family business. They had a large house, a sprawling estate, and a deep-rooted sense of family heritage. David's younger sister, Ruth, had been trying to conceive for a long time without success, and Lily was their shining star. Ruth was 37, and her younger sister, Lily's aunt, was 27 and single, living overseas, and didn't have children. But the connection they felt with Lily was undeniable. At first, we tried to make things work. Linda and Peter visited us regularly, about once or twice a month, and I didn't mind that. They were supportive and wanted to be involved in Lily's life. Ruth came by a few times as well, but the issue began to rise when the topic of traveling with Lily came up. They wanted her to visit them in their small town, to be a part of their world, to see the house and the family business. They wanted her to know where she came from, and I understood that, but I always put my foot down when they suggested that they take her to their state without me. I wasn't ready for that. It felt like too much, and I was hesitant to let my little girl fly across the country without me by her side. I had taken Lily to their hometown 3 times already, but they didn't think it was enough. They believed Lily should experience their way of life more, especially as she grew older. The tension started when I began dating Mark. He was 34 and he had a daughter, Emily, who was 4. I'd been seeing him for almost a year, and things had been going well. But once I introduced Mark into my life, everything changed with David's family. They didn't approve of him. Linda made her feelings very clear by commenting on the smallest things. She'd find something to say about Mark's car, his presence in my home, and the way Emily and Lily interacted. I wasn't surprised, but I was frustrated. It felt like they had no boundaries. I hadn't asked for their approval, but I wasn't prepared for the constant criticisms. Then came the Christmas holiday. It was my turn to host. Mark and I had been planning a get-together with our families and some close friends. I wanted it to be a special time for Lily, and I thought it would be nice if her grandparents could spend Christmas Eve with her. So I sent out an invitation. I told them they were more than welcome to join us on Christmas Eve, but if they wanted, they could take Lily out for lunch on Christmas Day, just the 3 of them. What I didn't expect was the response from Linda. 2 days later, I got a text from her. She said they already had plans to take Lily to their home for Christmas. The first told her this wasn't happening. I wasn't okay with the idea of them taking Lily without even consulting me. I felt blindsided and angry. For 2 days, I didn't hear from her, but then she called. When I picked up, her tone was calm at first, almost as if she were giving me space to cool off. She told me that she had given me enough time to be reasonable, and now it was time to have a conversation. I was confused. What was she talking about? She went on to say that they had rights over Lily, and it was time for her to be with them. She said she'd waited too long and that now, with Lily being older, it was time for her to travel without me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This had never been discussed. I told Linda she was being delusional and hung up. I didn't expect things to escalate, but they did quickly. The call ended with Linda accusing me of trying to replace David in Lily's life. That accusation hit me harder than I expected. I didn't respond well, and I said some things about David that were cruel and out of place. I was hurt, angry, and emotional. Shortly after that, Peter called me. He tried to reason with me, but during the conversation, he let it slip that they had already bought plane tickets for Lily without even asking me. They had planned for her to fly to their state, and they expected her to travel alone. My heart sank. This was getting out of hand, and I wasn't prepared for it. I told Peter there was no way I would let them take my daughter without my consent. I wasn't about to back down on this. Things escalated so quickly after that. I never imagined I would be fighting David's parents in court over something like this, but here we were. After that phone call with Peter, I was filled with dread and anxiety. I couldn't believe that they had taken it this far without even consulting me, but it was clear now that they weren't backing down. The days following that call were filled with silence, at least, from their side. I didn't hear from Linda or Peter for a while, which I thought was strange. I kept going on with my life, trying to focus on my daughter, on work, on keeping things as normal as possible. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. And then it did. 2 weeks after the phone call, I was served with court papers. It was a Friday afternoon when I opened the envelope, and my heart dropped. My hands started shaking. The court papers said they were suing me for custody of Lily. The audacity. They claimed I was unfit to raise her, that I was trying to keep her away from her family, that I was neglecting her need to be with them. It felt like a slap in the face. I immediately called my lawyer, Sarah. She's been a family friend for years, and I trust her with everything. I explained what had happened, and she calmed me down, told me to take a breath and not to panic. Sarah assured me that this wasn't the end of the world, and that grandparents suing for custody is a rare and difficult case to win. However, the emotional toll of it all was already weighing heavily on me. I couldn't understand how David's parents had gotten to this point. It wasn't like I had ever kept Lily from them. They saw her regularly. They came to visit us twice a month, sometimes more. They even took her for overnight visits a few times, and I never stopped them. I always encouraged them to build a strong relationship with her. But now, suddenly, this? After all the years of visiting, they were turning this into a war, and I was the target. I spent the weekend thinking about everything. Mark tried his best to comfort me, but I could tell he was struggling to understand what I was going through. He kept saying things like, "They're just grandparents. They don't have any legal rights to her." But I knew better. I knew that grandparents could petition for visitation rights, and in some cases, custody. I had already spoken to Sarah about this, and she made it clear that this could get ugly. Sarah explained that the first step would be to gather all the evidence that showed I was a good mother, that I provided for Lily's physical, emotional, and psychological well-being. She suggested I start documenting everything, from the times I had taken Lily to the pediatrician to the playdates with Mark's daughter, Emily, to the times I'd spent with her, just the two of us. Every detail would help. I also needed to start keeping track of everything that had happened with David's family, including all communications calls, emails, texts, anything that could prove that their behavior was unreasonable and that I wasn't alienating Lily from her father's side of the family. It was a lot to think about, but I had to do it. For Lily, the following week was a blur. I started compiling everything: visitation records, text messages, and even the pictures I had of Lily with her grandparents. I needed to show that I wasn't stopping them from seeing their granddaughter. The hardest part, though, was getting all the legal documentation in order. It was stressful, but I was determined to fight for my daughter, no matter what. Then came the first court hearing. It was set for the end of the month, and I felt a wave of nausea every time I thought about it. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let them take Lily from me. The thought of her being away from me for weeks at a time, living in a house that wasn't hers, with people who didn't respect my role as her mother, it made me sick to my stomach. When the day of the hearing finally arrived, I was a nervous wreck. Mark came with me, but he wasn't allowed to sit with me during the proceedings. He was there for emotional support, but this was my battle. Sarah was there, of course, and she had been preparing me for weeks. She reminded me to stay calm and collected, to focus on the facts and avoid getting emotional. But it was hard. Every fiber of my being was screaming that this wasn't right, that I shouldn't have to defend myself, that I shouldn't be here at all. The courtroom was cold and sterile, nothing like the warm, welcoming environment I had hoped to find in a family dispute. Linda and Peter were seated across from me. They looked completely different from how I remembered them, detached, almost robotic. The warmth I had once seen in them was gone. All that was left was cold determination. Their lawyer was a man I had never met, but he seemed confident. I had no idea what kind of strategy they had, but I knew one thing for sure: they were willing to fight dirty. The moment the hearing started, their lawyer launched into an emotional spiel about how Lily was their only remaining connection to David, how they had been there for her since the moment she was born, and how I was depriving them of their right to see her. I wanted to interrupt, to shout that I wasn't keeping her from them, but Sarah squeezed my hand and reminded me to keep my cool. So I did. I let their lawyer talk, but when it was my turn, I spoke from the heart. I explained how I had always encouraged Lily's relationship with her grandparents, how they had been regular visitors, and how I never denied them the chance to spend time with her. I spoke about the visits, the birthday parties, the holidays. I wasn't a perfect mother, but I loved Lily with everything I had, and I would fight anyone who tried to take her away from me. After the hearing, there was no immediate resolution. The judge said we would reconvene in a few weeks, and in the meantime, we would have to work out a temporary visitation agreement. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I wasn't prepared to give up anything when it came to Lily's safety and well-being, but I also knew that this fight wasn't going to be quick or easy. It would be a long, hard battle. That night, I went home, exhausted and drained. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I kept thinking about Lily, how she was so innocent in all of this, how she was the one who would suffer the most if this turned into a full custody battle. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let it. The next few weeks were a blur. The court hearings, the constant back and forth with Sarah, and the pressure from David's parents took a toll on me. Every time I thought things couldn't get worse, they somehow did. But no matter what, I had to keep pushing forward. Lily needed me to stay strong, even if I didn't always feel like I was. The temporary visitation arrangement was a mess. I was not okay with them having unsupervised visits, but the judge ruled that, for now, they could visit Lily at a neutral family center twice a month. Sarah said it was a small victory because, at least, it wasn't full access. But to me, it felt like a step back. I didn't want them to have any access to Lily without me, or someone else being present. I couldn't trust them anymore. What bothered me the most was how quickly they'd turned this into a fight. Linda and Peter didn't care about the damage this was causing Lily or our family. All they cared about was their right to control everything about her life. The idea that they wanted more than just visitation, that they were willing to go this far to take her away from me, made me sick to my stomach. How could they act like I was the one who was wrong for wanting to protect my daughter? The visits started at the family center a few weeks later. It was awkward and uncomfortable. I had to stand there, watching as Linda and Peter tried to play the part of loving grandparents. It felt like they were just going through the motions, trying to win favor with the social worker, trying to convince everyone that they were the victims in this whole situation. Lily didn't understand what was happening. She was only 3, and I could tell she was confused. She looked at me every time they took her, like she was unsure whether she should go with them. It broke my heart. I hated putting her through that, but I had no choice. I had to follow the court's orders, but I wasn't going to make this easy for them. Every visit, I showed up early, making sure I was there to pick her up. I watched them like a hawk, making sure nothing went wrong. I'd text Sarah updates after every visit. She advised me to stay professional and keep all communications with Linda and Peter through her no more personal conversations, no more texting them directly. That was the hardest part. I wanted to scream at Linda, to tell her how wrong she was, but Sarah was right. I had to play this carefully. If I lost my temper, it would only make me look bad in court. The hardest part was dealing with my own emotions. I never expected to be in this situation. I never thought I'd be fighting David's parents in court for custody of Lily. It felt surreal. I kept thinking, how did we get here? I kept telling myself that I just had to hang on a little longer. I had to trust the legal process, but the truth was, I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know how much longer I could go on like this. The stress started affecting every part of my life. Work became harder to focus on. I was tired all the time. Mark noticed, but he didn't know what to say. He tried to be supportive, but it was clear he didn't fully understand what I was going through. There were nights when I'd just lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with all the what-ifs. What if they won? What if I lost Lily? I knew I couldn't let that happen, but the fear was always there, gnawing at the back of my mind. Then came the phone call. It was a random Thursday evening when Linda called me. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Emma, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite place. "What about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not going to sit back and let you do this. I want to see my granddaughter without all this interference," she snapped. I couldn't believe it. After everything that had happened, after everything I had been through, she was still acting like the victim. She didn't understand that I wasn't trying to keep Lily from her, that I was just trying to protect her from whatever game they were playing. "I'm not going to let you take her from me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "This is not about you, Linda. This is about Lily's safety." Her silence on the other end was deafening. Then, after a moment, she spoke again, her tone venomous. "You'll regret this, Emma. We will get more visits. You can't stop this forever." I hung up before she could say anything else, my hands shaking. The words stung, but I wasn't going to let her scare me. I had to stay strong. That night, I told Sarah about the call. She wasn't surprised. "They're desperate, Emma," she said. "But you have the law on your side. You just need to keep doing what you're doing, document everything. Stay calm, and let them dig their own grave. They're not going to win this." The next few days passed in a blur. I focused on Lily and tried to put the legal battle out of my mind. I couldn't afford to lose myself in it. But the fear was always there, lurking in the background. Every time I saw Lily with her grandparents, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the last time I'd see her like this. I couldn't let that happen. No matter how hard this got, I had to keep fighting. The weeks after the phone call with Linda dragged on. Every visit, every email, every small interaction with David's parents felt like a battlefield. Each time I saw Lily with them, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing control. The family center visits weren't as bad as I had imagined they were structured. They were supervised, but the way Linda looked at me, the way she tried to manipulate the situation, it was clear that this was far from over. She wasn't backing down, and neither was I. I kept telling myself that I couldn't let fear run my life, but it was hard not to. Every time I dropped Lily off, a part of me worried that they were pulling her further into their world, that they were slowly working on her mind, turning her against me. What if she started to prefer them? What if she started to feel like I was the bad guy? The thoughts haunted me in the quiet moments of the night when I couldn't sleep. I tried not to let my paranoia show, but I couldn't help it. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying to protect Lily from the emotional games they were playing. It was exhausting. Then came the breakthrough I'd been hoping for. It wasn't much, but it was something. Sarah called me one afternoon, her voice full of that controlled excitement she only got when she had good news. "Emma, I've got some information for you. It's not a guarantee yet, but it could change things." I held my breath, afraid to get my hopes up. "What is it?" "David's parents are in serious financial trouble. The business is in debt, and Linda has been hiding some of the numbers. I don't know the full details yet, but I have a contact who's willing to talk. If we can prove they're financially unstable, it could impact their case." For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of relief. If their financial situation was as bad as Sarah suspected, maybe it would weaken their case. It wasn't enough to guarantee victory, but it was a crack, a weakness I could exploit. I couldn't ignore the lingering doubts, though. I couldn't stop wondering how far they would go to get what they wanted. I was prepared for anything at this point, but that didn't make it any easier. The days that followed felt like I was living in a storm. There were moments when I almost cracked, when the fear of losing Lily became too much to bear. But then I would see her face, her innocent smile, and I knew I couldn't stop now. I had to keep fighting for her. The tension reached a boiling point during the next court hearing. We were there to finalize the visitation agreement, and I could see the anticipation in Linda and Peter's eyes. They thought they were going to win, but I had my own cards to play. Sarah had done her work. We weren't going to let them have this victory. When it was finally our turn to speak, I stood up, feeling the weight of the moment. My voice didn't shake, even though I felt like I might collapse any second. I knew this was my chance to put an end to the constant struggle. "I understand that David's parents want to be a part of Lily's life," I began, my voice clear. "But their behavior, their actions, have been concerning. I've done everything I can to facilitate a relationship between them and my daughter. But this lawsuit, this attempt to control her life, is not about love. It's about power. And I will not allow my daughter to be a pawn in their game." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. I could see the judge's eyes narrowing as he processed my words. He wasn't convinced by their attempts to paint me as an unfit mother, but the tension in the room was thick. We were on the verge of something big, something that could shift the whole direction of this case. When the judge spoke, his words were firm. I will take all of this into consideration. There will be no immediate changes to the visitation agreement, but I am ordering a full investigation into the financial situation of David's parents. Any financial instability could affect their ability to care for Lily. We will reconvene in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. I had 6 weeks to prepare. 6 weeks to prove that Linda and Peter didn't deserve the control they were trying to exert over my daughter. 6 weeks felt like an eternity, but it was a lifeline. The door had been cracked open, and I had to push it wide. I left the courtroom feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. We had won a small victory, but the war wasn't over. There was still a long road ahead, and I had to keep fighting for Lily's safety and well-being. I couldn't let down my guard now, not when I was this close to ensuring her future. But as I walked out of the courthouse, I felt something shift within me. The fear, the doubt, it was still there, but it didn't consume me the way it had before. I was stronger now, and I was ready for whatever came next. The next few weeks felt like a strange sort of limbo. Everything was in motion, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the calm before the storm was just a thin veil over something much bigger. The court date was set. The investigation into David's parents' finances was underway, but in the quiet moments at home, when it was just me and Lily, the weight of it all was suffocating. I couldn't escape the thought of losing her. It wasn't just the legal battle that drained me, it was everything else. The constant vigilance, the little things that used to feel normal, now felt like landmines. When I dropped Lily off for supervised visits, I couldn't help but feel the eyes of Linda and Peter watching me, sizing me up. I couldn't stop myself from wondering what they were telling her when I wasn't there. Were they painting me as the villain? Were they using their time with her to create doubt? To confuse her? It was hard to push these thoughts away. Sarah was my rock through all of it, her advice and support keeping me grounded. But even she could sense how fragile I was becoming. One evening, she came over to my apartment, a rare visit that wasn't about paperwork or strategizing. "I can see it in your face," she said, settling into the couch beside me. "You're burning out. You can't keep going like this forever." I didn't respond at first, unsure of how to articulate the fear I felt. I wasn't just afraid for Lily's safety. I was afraid of losing myself. The pressure of everything, the lawsuit, the threats, the constant surveillance was beginning to unravel me. I had never felt so alone, even though I knew deep down that I wasn't. Sarah was there. Lily was there. But the fear was suffocating. I don't know what else to do, Sarah. Every time I think things are getting better, it feels like they're getting worse. What if they win? What if they really take her from me? Sarah's voice softened. I know it's hard, but you're not alone in this fight. And you are winning. Every step you've taken, every boundary you've set, every decision you've made, it's all in Lily's best interest. You're doing the right thing. Her words were a comfort, but they didn't stop the churn of doubt in my stomach. I couldn't stop wondering if Linda and Peter had somehow found a way to turn the system in their favor, if they had connections or power that I couldn't even begin to comprehend. Every time I thought about how deeply they had tried to manipulate me, I felt the anger bubbling up again, mixing with the fear. One night, I sat down at my kitchen table after putting Lily to bed and stared at the papers in front of me. The financial reports from Sarah's contact, the documents from the court, the visitation records. I thought back to that moment in the courtroom when the judge had spoken. I had told him everything about David's parents, about their manipulation, their obsession with control, but it wasn't just their actions I was concerned about anymore. It was their intention. I had a sick feeling in my gut that David's parents weren't just interested in visitation. They wanted more than that. They wanted to control Lily's life, and if they succeeded in that, it would be a victory for them. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply they had managed to entangle themselves in my life, even after all the boundaries I'd set. Their power wasn't just in the legal documents. It was in their persistence, in the way they wore me down. But I wasn't going to let them have that power anymore. It was then that I made a decision. I had to fight back, harder than I ever had before. I couldn't let them drag this out any longer, and I couldn't let their manipulations seep into Lily's life any further. The next morning, I called Sarah. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes," I said. "We're going to end this. I don't care what it takes." Her voice was calm but firm, the way she always spoke when she was serious. I thought you might say that. We'll start preparing. Let's get everything we need to push this case forward. We'll turn the tables. I'll make sure the financial investigation is airtight. We'll show the court what kind of people they really are. I didn't feel the rush of triumph or even relief. It was a heavy decision, one that felt like the first step in a war. I wasn't sure I could win, but I couldn't let them win either. This wasn't just about legal victory, it was about protecting Lily. The days passed in a blur of legal paperwork and phone calls with Sarah. As much as I tried to keep it together for Lily, I could feel the exhaustion creeping in. The strain of managing everything, the lawsuit, the visits, the emotional toll it was taking on me was pushing me to my limits. But I kept going. I had to. Then something unexpected happened. I was at the family center for a scheduled visit when I noticed Linda and Peter talking in hushed voices near the entrance. They were standing close, whispering, but I could tell from the tension in their body language that something was off. It wasn't just the usual animosity between us. This felt different. I didn't approach them. I couldn't trust myself not to lash out, but it was hard not to overhear their conversation. The words that drifted to me made my heart race. "We can't let her do this," Linda was saying, her voice low but full of venom. "If we don't push harder, we'll lose everything. We can't let her win." Peter's voice, always a little softer, followed. "We need to be careful. If we push too hard, we risk everything. This could backfire." I had no idea what they were planning, but I knew one thing for sure: they weren't backing down, and neither was I. I walked away from the center that day with a deep sense of unease settling in my chest. It wasn't over. It wasn't close to being over. The weeks that followed felt like walking a tightrope. The legal battle was dragging on, but Sarah and I were relentless, putting everything we had into proving that David's parents were unfit for the kind of access they were demanding. They weren't just trying to get visitation. They were trying to control every aspect of Lily's life. It was clear now. They were playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were far higher than I had originally thought. The more I learned about David's parents, the more I began to see them for who they really were: manipulative, entitled, and willing to do whatever it took to get their way. I wasn't just fighting for visitation rights anymore. I was fighting to protect my daughter from people who didn't care about her well-being. They cared about their image, their legacy, and their control. One evening, as I was reviewing some of the documents Sarah had sent over, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "They've escalated things. Linda has started calling in favors from old friends, people with power. She's got connections in the local community. Be prepared for what's coming next. This is about to get ugly." I felt a chill run down my spine. I'd been expecting something like this, but hearing it confirmed in writing made it real. Linda was playing a game I wasn't ready for. And Peter, well, he was only making things worse, but I wasn't going to let them scare me. I had to remain focused. I had to remain strong for Lily. The next day, I received a call from Sarah that set everything into motion. "We've been served," she said, her tone calm but urgent. "The judge has called for a meeting. They're bringing in a mediator." The word mediator hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to meditate. I didn't want to negotiate. I wanted to put an end to this once and for all. I could feel the anger building up inside me. I'd spent months preparing, but now I was about to face them again, in a room where they would try to manipulate the truth. "Sarah, I don't want to play their game. I won't let them walk all over me and Lily. I'm done compromising." "I know," Sarah said, her voice unwavering. "And you don't have to compromise. But you need to be smart about this. We're in the final stretch now." The meeting with the mediator was scheduled for the following week. I spent the next several days preparing myself for the emotional toll it would take. I read through the legal documents again, took notes, and made sure everything was in order. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily's face, so innocent, so trusting, and I knew I couldn't let this drag on any longer. The day of the meeting arrived. The air in the room was thick with tension. Linda and Peter sat across from me, their faces cold, their eyes calculating. Sarah and my lawyer sat beside me, both of them exuding an aura of calm that I didn't feel. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The mediator, a professional who had seen countless cases like mine, began the session by introducing the rules. It was clear from the start that he was trying to keep things civil, but Linda and Peter weren't interested in civility. They came in with their demands, trying to dictate terms, as if they had any real right to do so. "I think it's time we address the real issue here," Linda began, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "We just want what's best for Lily. We want her to experience her family, and we believe that we should have more time with her, especially around the holidays." I had heard these arguments 1,000 times, and each time, it grated on me more. They didn't want what was best for Lily, they wanted control. They wanted to replace me. They wanted to prove that they could make decisions for her, decisions that I had never agreed to. I stood up. "This is not about what's best for Lily. It's about what's best for you. You're trying to manipulate her life, trying to use her as a pawn in your game. I will not allow it. I will not allow you to take her from me." The mediator raised his hand, signaling for calm, but I wasn't finished. "I've spent months protecting her from you, from your manipulation. I've been nothing but patient, trying to accommodate your demands. But I am done. I will not let you take her from me. Not now. Not ever." Linda's face turned red with anger, but Peter didn't seem to react. He was used to her outbursts. "You think you're the only one who loves her?" Linda hissed. "You're not her only family. We're just trying to give her the love she deserves." I almost laughed, but I didn't. I was too angry, too focused. You don't get to decide what love is. Love isn't controlling someone's life. Love isn't trying to manipulate a child's future. Love is letting them grow, letting them live, and respecting their boundaries. You've never respected mine, and I'm not going to let you violate Lily's. It was a tense standoff, but Sarah and my lawyer stepped in, and the mediator called for a short break. I could feel the walls closing in on me, but I knew that I couldn't back down now. I had to protect Lily at all costs. When the meeting resumed, things shifted. The mediator, who had been trying to remain neutral, could see how serious I was. He asked Linda and Peter to clarify their intentions. It became clear that their love for Lily was, at best, conditional. They were demanding more time with her, more control, all while ignoring the fact that I had been the one raising her. I was the one who had been there for every milestone, every tantrum, every joy. The mediator pushed them for specifics, and that's when Linda's true colors started to show. She didn't care about what was best for Lily. She cared about winning. And when she saw that I wasn't going to give in, her demeanor shifted. "Fine," she said coldly. "We'll leave you to your life. But mark my words, this isn't over." And just like that, it ended. At least for now. I left the meeting feeling drained, like I had just fought a battle. I couldn't fully win, but one that I had still come out of standing. It wasn't over, but it felt like the beginning of the end. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in months, I felt like I had the upper hand. And no matter what came next, I would fight for Lily. Always.